Welcome back to The Inksync. I am Annie.
I'm Kaylee.
And this is our podcast for book buddies, media maniacs, fiction fiends, and anyone who wants to know just a little bit more about their favorite stories and what's next.
I think we should definitely market fiction fiends.
Fiction fiends?
Yes.
I like fiction fiends too. I also like media maniacs.
Yeah.
When I found
or
it.
mavens. I like that one.
I didn't want to gender it. I feel like Maven is slightly gendered.
Oh, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, maniacs.
Yeah.
I like it.
Maniacs, ungendered. You know what? Anybody could be a maniac. You could be a maniac. I could be a maniac.
Annie, we are. Let's. Yes.
Finally.
We did it.
I am acknowledged. All right, Kaylee, let's do a correction corner. We had some feedback from one of our listeners who had been following the Hugo Awards situation much more closely than we have. And so I'm going to read you the update from her.
Thank you.
We were kind of confused about what the actual problem was. We saw the resignations, we saw the controversy online, but it seems like there was a kind of confusion about what actually had happened.
It was glossed over. So
Mhm.
it was very much like, well, certain entries were rejected without necessarily meeting official standards that would have qualified them for rejection.
And that's a big deal because the Hugo Awards are a big deal in the sci-fi fantasy community. So this is something that got a lot of traction. This is a friend, Luna. So according to Luna, she says, a bunch of internal emails were released, which showed that the board decided to preemptively create dossiers on writers with no prompting by either the corporation involved or the PRC as a whole. The PRC is the Chinese government. Also, the Hugo Awards are held every year at Worldcon, and the location is decided through a bid system to the Worldcon organization, much like the World Cup or the Olympics. A fan organization in China petitioned for Worldcon to be held there and did a lot of the initial planning before more conservative Chinese corporation took over the event. But you guys did a great job tapping into the greater issue, which was the disenfranchisement of the Chinese authors. The Hugo Awards threw out a ton of down ballots, which they had previously cemented in their bylaws as being something they would never do. So not only were writers disenfranchised, so were others. The whole picture definitely isn't clear, but integrity of the org has been obliterated. And you guys did a nice job covering it. Thank you, Luna.
Well,
and thank you for the in-depth analysis.
Yes, please, always. And more people, feel free if you would like to comment or just write into us if something it's already in your wheelhouse, or you do more research because you are super interested. Mm-hmm. We would love to bring your perspective.
Absolutely. So thank you, Luna. We really appreciate it. And I think that is a really good, succinct way to talk about. So we talked about the controversy with, or Jiren J. Zhao had been booted, essentially, from the awards and found out after those internal documents were released that it wasn't for any reason that anyone was going to talk about.
Right.
So she took to her social media, and she's one of the more popular authors that is on TikTok, so that got a lot of traction. Neil Gaiman was another one that got kind of sidelined, and of course Neil Gaiman is just the internet's favorite author. He's famously accessible on every platform, so of course people were up in arms about that as well. And he had just had, The Sandman, which came out, and that was one of the things that was nominated that had gotten a little bit iffy. So I cannot imagine what they were thinking.
So in relation to this, what we were just talking about, the actual article that brought this whole situation up, I'm just wondering if they didn't necessarily, because they've been mostly insulated from the wider impact, but when somebody has your name and your face and they can get to you through official channels, which in this case they could because they were officially known through the Hugo lines, they're gonna come for you. If you fuck up bad enough, and in this case you did, so I'm just wondering if maybe they were just used to it not getting out and were more comfortable because
I'm not sure.
Internally in their country, they notoriously don't always bow to individual freedoms.
Yeah, so the culture in a Chinese company would be to not worry about making these changes internally because no one would hear about them. But the Hugo policy is to release these changes when they happen. So a bunch of people were blindsided by saying oh, that's right, the Hugo audience has a problem with this. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, maybe that is part of it. What Luna is saying, though, is that the Hugo Awards did it themselves without any prompting, which seems insane. Well, or maybe there's just no record of the prompting.
Or it's individuals that were local. I think that's something that that I had seen, was that there were
there is a local element. Yeah.
Yes, so I want to say that might have had something to do with it.
That makes sense too.
But I have to go back and review those articles again. I think I actually also jumped, like, maybe from the official articles that I was like, this is interesting, and I just, rabbit hole clicked.
Reasonable.
May have found some additional content, so I'll see if I can dig out what I read before about it.
Yeah,
well.
I mean, again though, like, what I read, what you read, what Luna read, like, it all seems to be, like, something almost entirely different. Like, some people are saying, like, we don't know what's going on. As other people are saying, oh, no, we know exactly what's going on. And then other people are saying, like, it's not this person's fault. And then other people are saying, it's absolutely that person's fault. So it's, like, it seems like there's a lot of, like you're saying, misinformation that maybe is much more common in other areas, but, like, we are not used to it in this arena.
We want to cut through that.
Yeah.
And we're used to being able to, like, just give us the information and we'll figure it out then. And they're like, well, we don't want to do that because then you'll figure it out. And we're like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. Because
Anyway.
we feel like there is, like, black and white, right and wrong based on the constitution of the Hugo Awards, not, like...
Even if you don't think it's, like, your local, like, guidelines or whatever,
right,
kind of lean to that. So, in this case... anyway, moving on.
What a time. Kaylee, let's get into the
We live in a society.
We live in a society. God, I hate it. Moving on to libraries and book bans. I wrote in my notes, breaking news, the world still sucks for this one.
there was some good news in this.
There are some states that are fighting back against book bans. So I linked to the Publishers Weekly This Week in Libraries newsletter, where they essentially just round up news from local and public libraries around the country, and also legislators who are protecting those librarians and some who are not. I didn't want to go too deeply into this, Kaylee, just because some of these are depressing and some of them are just exactly the same as what we've been talking about for the past, like, year.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to say I have been going through and working on a project about banned books in general. And I do want us to talk about some nuance here. I don't know if I added it into the notes that I sent you or if I just sent the link. I feel like there is nuance in here that gets lost. If you look at, like, the top 10 books that are getting banned in schools, it's stuff like, whichever one of the most recent ACOTAR book that had, like, 7 graphic sex scenes with these 2 people. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can see why you wouldn't want that in a 3rd grade class, but also that's not being sold to 3rd grade classes. It's not being sold to children.
What 3rd grade library or what elementary school library had these in the first place? Exactly,
yes. And I think that nuance gets lost because if you do look at those lists, if you're like a parent and you say, oh, like, what are these books that are being banned? And you see that list, you're like, oh, yes, absolutely. Those should be banned. They shouldn't be in my kid's class. And I absolutely understand that, and I am not against the idea of taking non-YA books out of a YA space. Totally gotcha. The problem that I have, and maybe you have a different nuanced perspective, Kaylee, but mine is that there are absolutely bigoted, horrible people using this movement as cover to then get rid of any mentions of any gender differences, genitals in general, anything that is remotely sex positive for children, which is something that...
And again, this is not the act of sex. It is...
Right.
Just, like, the fact that it exists in the world.
Sure.
And not necessarily, like, just to be clear, not a how-to-have manual. It's, like, the books that explain, like, why, like, for kids, like, why it's okay that you have different private parts than your brother or whatever. When you have, you have younger kids that were used to taking a bath together and now they're not because things are changing or whatever, Like, that's a thing. Like, parents have used those as tools, and it's not necessarily... It's and I'm not going to get into whether or not, you want to have those conversations with your kid or not. You should have them, probably. I don't think that they should just stumble across these things just in the library on their own without some sort of context. But those books are being picked up and held up as these are dangerous. And no, they're dangerous to a certain point of view.
Yeah. And another thing that I think a lot of those books specifically, I think we're thinking of similar books, do is say, like,
it's okay,
and here is how to report when you have been sexually assaulted, which I do understand ultimately that, like, you don't want to put that kind of thing into a kid's head, especially a very sensitive kid who might not totally understand what they're reading. I get that. I think that there is a level of like conscious parenting that needs to go into it.
But that should be the case
like,
with all of school.
Absolutely. And I also think that you making one kid like mildly confused and uncomfortable versus helping one who is being actively physically abused, you can't even make the comparison. Like even those kids would say, no, help my friend, you know?
Yes.
And also I didn't put this in here because there was a lot of hearsay and it was kind of like gossipy drama, but there was a school system in New York that reported that it had found a massive dumpster full of books with notes attached to them from conservative groups talking about why they hated all of these books. And some of them were as simple as like, this protagonist has 2 dads. Can't have that. And it was like, why? The dads had like nothing to do with the fucking plot.
Like they were just mentioned. Bill and Steve.
Like Bill and Steve made dinner. Oops. Nope. Can't have that. Like that's the kind of thing that we are against, is people using the overall idea of not exposing children to graphic sex, which is a reasonable thing to do,
100%.
as cover for banning anything, any mention of something that they personally disagree with. And also
racism and prejudice.
There was an account of a man who was asking to ban books that talked about the racial history of, I want to say, his town, because he's like, I don't want anyone telling my daughter that she should feel guilty about her past. And it's like, bro, ain't her past.
Nobody was telling her to feel guilty. This
yeah,
is just...
sir. Like that's the kind of thing that we're against. Like legislating that no one should ever feel uncomfortable ever is, first of all, impossible because everyone's unique and they have their own lives. And second of all, not helping because
you're making other people uncomfortable by doing this.
Right. And if you don't teach kids history, if you don't teach people anything, then they're not going to learn and grow. Society is made up of people. And if we don't teach people how to learn and grow, they won't. And we need to. Mm-hmm. Unless you want to say that today is perfect, which I don't think it is. We can't say that any other time before now has been perfect either. We want to do better. We want tomorrow to be even better for our children. And this is how we do that, by teaching them, not by banning things arbitrarily to give cover to other people who want to ban things maliciously. That's what I wanted to say, Kaylee. Did you have any other nuance to throw in there?
Oh, no. I just wanted to say that the bill in Nebraska that was going to expose schools or librarians to criminal legislation didn't make it off the floor.
Good. Yes. Hey, go team. Go Nebraska.
Yeah. So they weren't able to advance that particular bill, and that's good.
Nebraska was able to protect its librarians, which is a good thing.
Well, I don't know if it was like an active protection, but it was certainly a passive protection at least.
I'll take it.
Yeah, well, you know what? Take the win where you can.
I'll take a buff rather than an action. I'm letting it happen.
Yep, exactly.
Moving on to our trending news section. These are stories that don't go super deep. There's not like a million things to talk about here, but we want to make sure that you are up on the coffee table talk around TikTok. Like, you want your friends to think you're cool. You want your friends to think you know what's going on Book Talk. We've got you covered.
We're ready.
We're ready. There's drama on Book Talk right now, Kaylee.
Annie.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about this. So before we were like reviewing this for this episode, I had known about Fanbinding separately. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk, I'm just going to
let's talk about it. What is Fanbinding, Kaylee?
So Fanbinding is when you have fan content that you print or have printed professionally and actually bound, essentially. So I just want to say very clearly, this is not about you in your house printing out a copy of a story that you liked and sticking it on a shelf. This is about going to a separate location or a separate party, or you yourself, I suppose, but like generating an actual book-bound version of this particular story. And
usually a fanfic, which is why it's called Fanbinding. Yeah,
exactly. Well, because original fiction can just be bound. Don't steal it from an author and just go do it in the darkness. But like, you can just go buy that. That's just buying a book at that point. But like, when is it okay? When is it not okay? Basically, and as with anything, well, it's fan fiction, and fan fiction operates at least in America, as a gray area. We operate under fair use and parody guidelines. This isn't even like a law. It's like a recommendation.
Yes, to be clear for the younger nerds out there, fair use is not a law. It's a guideline, and which is one of the main reasons that AO3 hires lawyers.
Keeps
lawyers on staff and pretty much no one else.
Yeah, they have like their technology crew and they have their lawyers, and
everybody else is a volunteer.
They do have tag wranglers, but I think they're mostly volunteers.
Yeah, I think the tag wranglers are volunteers. I assume so.
Yeah. So they do have probably
being a professional tag wrangler.
If I was to say, they might have like one or two that are on staff, but I can't. That has to be. Well, that has to be such a that's a nightmare.
You think is a nightmare?
If everybody could be on staff, but like all their money goes into the technology and the lawyers.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I derailed us. Go ahead.
No, that's fair. Well, as with anything, you have to come back to, well, are you approaching something in good faith? So there are two different ways or two different scenarios that this is going to happen. You go and have something done, which is you get something printed and it's essentially at cost, or somebody else takes this content, transforms it in some fashion, and then sells it to you for a profit. Mm-hmm. You cannot profit on an original, or you cannot profit on somebody else's IP that was transformed separately by a second party, and neither of those parties are getting $1 for this thing that you are now selling. Mm-hmm. That is not legal.
That absolutely goes beyond the gray area of fan fiction into the black area of illegality. Yeah.
So there are ways that you can, or there are things that have been operating in good faith in this region, which is for charity donations. Somebody might offer or fan art, or to decorate something and have it printed or something for a charity donation, and that's still not fully supported or protected, but it is certainly not a for-profit margin thing that is being done. So the issue here is that people are having to pull their books, their fan fiction, that are novels, let me be clear, for a variety of reasons. This particular article that we're discussing here was from Wired, I want to say. But this was talking about somebody that was just hey, I'm going to be pulling my story, in a month or something like that, and I'm going to be transforming it into an original novel. I didn't originally want to pull it, but this has been an issue where people are selling my work, not giving me money, and making hundreds of dollars per instance, and I have no recourse, and I don't want to go to court because that will hurt everybody, so I have to pull this. Look, if you are on Etsy right now doing this, stop. Don't do that. You can fan art, you can sell your fan art, because that's different. Mm-hmm. And there's very clear arguments. I will happily discuss this with anyone offline. Mm-hmm. But don't take a word for word thing that somebody else created based off of an IP that a third party created. What is going through your head? Mm-hmm. No! You're wrong.
Yeah.
You are wrong. You can do if you want to do inserts or something that people can use as folders or binders, again based on art or something like that, scrapbooking. There's ways to make this work and still be creative and still be in that space that doesn't involve theft.
Yeah, I got the impression that this Wired author was a fan of this fan fiction author who had put out that statement saying, I'm going to take my work down because there are people out there on Etsy who are printing my work out and selling it and not giving me anything. And it's such a complicated situation because, again, fan fiction is such a gray area. Fan fiction traditionally hasn't been something that anyone gets paid for because it's such a gray area. Once you start getting paid, that gray area gets a lot smaller. It gets much more risky.
It gets pretty black and white at that point, in my opinion.
Right, exactly. So, these people operating outside of it and taking other people's fan work and like you're saying, and then selling it, that's also taking it into a really bad faith way, because then you're making money on something that someone who created the thing can't make money on because it's a whole thing. Anyway, so I very much remember the fan binding conversation when I was in high school of because we would be printing stuff out on the school printer and then passing it around if someone found a good story that they really liked and they wanted to hand it off to people.
My friend's parents threw so many things of mine away that I just had to stop giving her stuff.
Did you?
I was so mad.
Was it the content, or was it just like, this is trash, this isn't like something
like, they thought she wasn't paying attention to school? Maybe she wasn't. I don't know. Maybe the Gundam Wing fan fiction was causing trouble for her grades, but like she never said anything about that. Just like they threw it away, and I'm like, God dang it.
Yeah. But this has been a conversation for a long time, and it's one of those ones that's coming up again. It's like, I have later in my notes, we have another conversation that's been going around on social media for as long as I can remember and has come back around once again. But I definitely thought that this was an interesting aspect to it. I have never seen a fan fiction author say, I'm taking all of this down and then I'm going to publish it as an original fiction. I think that a lot of probably fan fiction authors have done that before, but I think that we're in a new era where they're much more open about it. Like, I can't imagine someone doing that separately. We talk about, like, 50 Shades of Grey was like one of the very first like openly fan fiction derived stories.
Can I segue briefly?
Please do.
Just into this topic.
Oh yeah.
So I read a self-insert Doctor Doom fan fiction, and the end of it was that this girl was taking it down and she was working with a publishing house, and I thought that was amazing, and I still haven't seen that book, and I'm really mad about it.
Yeah, sorry.
Like, I just wanted to ugh.
Kaylee is calling you out right now, fan fiction person.
Help me help you. I would love to buy that.
Yeah. But yes, this is just a conversation that's been going around, and so like a new round of opinions has been coming out about people talking about it. Again, fan fiction is a gray area, so I think it's probably going to keep getting talked about because we can't have a black and white solution because of the gray legalities. So that's one thing that was...
Don't make a profit off fan fiction.
Yeah.
I feel like you can probably... if you're not sure about something, lean on that as the answer.
Yeah.
And if that is the answer, then you know what to do.
Yeah. So that's something that was making the rounds. Here's another one. Spredges fan artists are under fire. So if you aren't a cool girly on the internet now, you might not know what Spredges are. Let me tell you. If you get a hardcover book and on the page edges of that hardcover book, there's like some kind of painting. My old copy of Lord of the Rings has like the tree of Gondor on the edges of the pages, and so like you can like flip through the pages and like see the tree. It's really beautiful. It's gorgeous. You can create those manually if you would like. You can take a hardcover book and paint the edges of the hardcover book in whatever you want it to be. And that's still usable as a book as long as the paint's not making like the book pages stick together. But if you're doing it well, it won't work or it won't happen, which is good. A lot of people want special editions of books. We've talked about this before. Like, one of the things that Brandon Sanderson was doing with his latest round of book releases was giving out these special editions, these like special, like gloss covered painted edges editions of his books. People like that. They do like that.
It's one of the big drivers behind the initial getting the initial rounds. Like, you pay a couple more bucks when like something comes out in hardback and you get the special edition.
Exactly.
That has like art and is really cool. Like, I think
or an interview with the author in the back. Yeah, people like that stuff. Most publishing houses don't do that though. When they release something, they're just releasing it, hardcover. They're like, here it is bigger, here it is slightly smaller in paperback, whatever. So fans are turning to Spredges artists. Yes, they're called Spredges, which is sprayed edges instead of painted edges. But I think actually, in fact, they are painting the edges. But they're called Spredges artists. They're buying the books. I want to be clear here. This does start with a purchase of a book. And they are painting, the edges of those pages and then shipping them out to, their clients who are asking for these Spredges. This is not actually a gray area. I do want to be clear and say...
fully legal.
As someone who did go through a copyright and licensing class 2 semesters, this is 100% legal. It's called the right of first purchase, and you can do whatever you want with a book once you own it. It's not up to anyone else. But some people are saying, hey, when you do that and you sell that book for more than you purchased it for, you are robbing the author of extra money. This felt so much like the ARC discussion to me that it was almost like I was having deja vu. You should go back and listen to our ARC discussion, everyone. This is another thing that people say about ARCs. Like, someone will send out an advanced reader copy to an influencer to read the book and get buzz up for it. And then people are like, I can't believe you're not paying the author for that. And I'm just like, come on. I know authors aren't getting paid enough, but this is not it. This ain't it, folks.
This is not the hill. This is not the one.
Also, another thing I want to get my last thing out before I let you talk.
Oh, no, you're good. Go ahead.
Interrupting you. No one commissions a Spredged version of a book that they don't already own. Like, that author already got basically 2 sales out of this person. I promise it's fine. That's my thought anyway.
I agree. I understand the thought behind the argument, but I am inclined to say this isn't impacting the bottom dollar for the author as much as the publishing house paying them poorly, like just across the board.
What I'm saying is that the publishing house should just be printing
doing
more special editions.
Just give or doing like an option for some of their popular titles where you can just request one special order or something, or and then they can just put you in a small batch, and when they get enough to make it worth it, they ship them out, like something along those lines. 100%.
Yeah.
I think that this is a question of people ignoring a boulder to kick a rock.
What a good metaphor. Did you just come up with that?
Yes.
I like it. Ignore the boulder to kick the rock. Love it.
So, again, I get it. You know, there's questions about like how they're getting the books and whether the author is getting full, like what the most money that they could for the initial sale. Don't focus on the real fight, in my opinion, which is equitable pay for authors, as much as we can get to be equitable for content creators.
Next conversation that is happening on the feed. A new genre has spawned. I will say that I've been seeing these books showing up for a while, and I'm very glad that now Reactor magazine has decided that they are real. Kaylee, have you seen the Legends and Lattes series? Has it come up on your feed at all?
It's in exactly the same vein as my Cursed Cocktails that I...
Yes.
Yes, I actually have the first book.
Oh, good. I have it too. I just haven't read it yet. I just love... The cover is so cozy fantasy. So this is a new genre, I will say, that's been creating a lot of buzz on the feeds. It's called cozy fiction or cozy fantasy, where, you know, we just want to do a thing. And maybe we aren't even going to leave our small town. Maybe we aren't even going to leave our house or our inn or whatever. The stakes aren't like sky high. We don't need to save the world, but we do need to get Jim... or whatever, his thing. Follow us as we help Jim. And you're just like, yes! Thank you!
It's literally what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So it's small stakes, typically. Slice of life. You get your world building, you get your characters. Don't have the depressing sadness just kind of hanging over the whole book, or like the huge like angst of being the chosen one or whatever. You're finding a place to fit. And there are ways to get to action adventure, and there's a book series that I'm reading now which is cozy fantasy adventure. So it's very much the big story is happening in the background, and then this one kid who's like, he got chosen, he was like, fuck no, and went off to wizard school. He's like, absolutely not. And so it's still happening. He's still trying to find ways to like contribute, but like in a way where it's just him and his friends. Like it's so good. It's so good. If you like T. Kingfisher books, this is her genre. Like also because even when you've got like these higher stakes, like it's just like, it's people being realistic and like having the bonds that they need and making friends and building these relationships, in my opinion. Those are the things that I love about her work. And that's what you're going to see typically exemplified in this section of each of these genres.
Yeah. And so Reactor Mag points out that this comes from the cozy mystery genre, or the naming convention comes from this cozy mystery genre, which I think is accurate. Because that was something like, have you ever seen Murder, She Wrote? Please note that there's an entire genre of books about like that.
Midsummer Mysteries is a TV, and it's book show and TV, or book show. It's a book show. That's actually a really good name for it. It's a book series that was turned into a TV show, I believe. But yeah, I mean, that's like 100% the feel. Like bad things happen, but like for the most part, it's kind of pleasant. It's like if somebody got killed in the beginning of the Great British Bake Off and then they had to figure out who done it.
You're joking, but I actually just downloaded a book where that's basically the description.
Oh my, I love it. You'll have to let me know.
Because they're all in like an isolated manor in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, it's a locked room mystery. Yeah. I love it.
And now for our favorite news section, celebrating women and minorities, killing it in publishing, our girl, Ada Limon.
Hell yes.
What'd she do, Kaylee?
She's gonna get her poem shot into space, Annie.
She's getting a poem shot into space.
She got commissioned by NASA.
Dude,
that's amazing. That's
amazing.
Bonkers. I mean, like, so, like, awards and stuff in general, people aspire to. Mm-hmm. But you can't, like...
Yeah.
You can't.
I mean,
nothing
also,
that you can do to be like, fucking NASA, call me as a poet.
Yeah.
Like, typically, that's not a thing that you can knowingly, like, right now that we have been able to knowingly, like, advertise ourselves for.
Right. Yeah. As an aside, she's nominated as a Time Woman of the Year, but also...
I'm sorry, I thought the space thing was just cooler.
Way better.
She
cooler.
got, so Ada is obviously a two-term...
Poet laureate.
Yes. Yeah, just in case that was
sorry.
unclear.
Yeah.
If that was unclear or just you hadn't, it's okay, you know, you don't have to know everything. No. But like, but she's great and we're very pleased for her. Good for you.
Yes.
But yeah, NASA called her up and she was like, and then I hung up the phone and was like, oh my God. And I was so insanely cute. I love that.
So the Europa Clipper, which is going to be exploring the moons of Jupiter soon. Not now, but soon. It's going to be there, I believe, in 2030, but it will be launching in the next couple months. Mm-hmm. So they are getting the final checks done, and one of the things that they did was put the plaque on it, if anyone knows a lot about space, like me. Or if you've ever seen... Which Star Trek movie was that had V'ger in it?
Oh, I don't know.
But if you've ever seen that one Star Trek movie, you know that the Golden Record is on the Voyager 1 spacecraft. And in an homage to that, NASA decided to put onto the Europa Clipper probe a plaque with a poem by Ada Limon. And on the other side, a display of a bunch of languages, their waveforms saying water. So like the audio waveforms on the back. And then in the middle is a sign language version of water. And I was like, that is so smart. Because one of the moons of Jupiter, Europa, famously has water on it. And that's like one of the main reasons we want to go there.
We want to see what's up.
Like, that's so cool. I'm so happy and so proud. Go Ada Limon. Congratulations to all marginalized peoples in publishing.
Absolutely.
And now for our favorite non-news section. Kaylee, tell me more about what you're reading.
Okay, so I know that I have this fantastic book waiting for me that I bought when I was in Williamsburg. It is nonfiction, looks super interesting. But instead, I'm currently chewing my way through a 7-book series that I have to, like, I bought, like, the first 4 immediately. And I was like, this, again, like, guys, now that I'm reading again, I'm remembering why reading is so expensive. It's just so expensive. Thank God I make good money. I guess, like, no, I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna keep reading. But anyway, so it's called The Mark of the Fool. And the beginning is basically like this character, he's turning 18. It's his 18th birthday. He just got accepted on scholarship to the greatest magic school in fantasy country in fantasy world that he lives in, right? It's good for him. He's got so he and his sister are actually orphans. Their parents died when they were very young, off screen. So this is like a good thing that's happening. He's actually going to take his sister's going with him. They've just gotten their inheritance once he turned 18 from their parents, and they're going together. It's like a family. This is great. So his fantasy country is beset, like every fantasy country, and it's just, I love the way that this is approached. Like in the beginning, it's like, oh, this is our burden or whatever, and then like he goes to school and it's like every country has its thing. We all have a thing. So in his country, it's like this enemy comes back every 100 years, and it's called the cycle. And 5 people are chosen, 5 heroes, and then you've got the really great, like the cleric, you've got the wizard. You've got the fighter, and then you've got like the paladin, basically. So you've got the chosen, who has like minor versions of all of those abilities. So he's a good fighter. He's got, magic. He's got some divine healing abilities. Then you've got the fighter that has like all of the fighting abilities of every fighter that's ever been a fighter in this line. And the wizard gets a boost to their magic. And the cleric obviously has their cleric-y spells, or whatever they call them. Their divine chants. And then you have the fool, who is actively can't do any of those things. Like, in fact, their mark hinders them from fighting, or from using magic, or from using divine abilities.
Wait, so this is a chosen hero that can't do anything.
Can't do the things while you're being beset upon by monsters. And what he can do is literally everything else.
What a mood.
And he's just like, no! And
wait, so he gets chosen as the fool?
He gets chosen as the fool. And again, remember, magic. He's been accepted to magic school. He's like, no, I refuse. So he's got like his one spell that he's been working on. That's how he got accepted in, like, on scholarship. And he's like, no, there has to be a way. So he figures out how to make it work. And it's obnoxiously difficult. And he has to relearn, like, pretty much everything, how to do it again. And from the very beginning. And then exposing, like, this mystery. And he's like, I'm not staying here to get discovered and shanghaied into being the babysitter and probably demon bait for these monsters, because that's what historically the fool has been like in the books. Like, this has been going on for thousands of years apparently, and every cycle this is what happens. And he's like, absolutely the fuck not. So he goes to like the people that have like, they adopted him and his sister basically when their family died, and like that's where he's kind of been staying in their tavern. And there's like an exodus, like people are leaving, like the civilians are leaving the country now that the cycle has started, right? So they're all packing, they're just like, we're all gonna leave. And then he turns 18 very late into the evening. All of this comes out and they're like, absolutely not. And he's like, I'm going to magic school. And they're like, oh, thank God. We didn't, like, no, the gods already took your parents. They're gonna take your future. Fuck no. So he has supportive adults. Their daughter is like his best friend, and she's a hunter. She's like one of the most dangerous people in the series so far. It's so good. So she's like, obviously I'm coming with you and your 10-year-old sister. You're not just gonna walk into the wilderness alone with no defense. And
my God, responsible people.
It's amazing. So, and they just go to wizard school. They get out, they have to fight, but like, it's okay. Like, they figure it out. And his whole thing is just being like a practical hero, like a practical person. Like, okay, what can I do? What do I have? How can we adapt to the situation? And it's just a very fun, refreshing read. But like their bonds, again, their relationships, the characters are so good. They get to school. He's able to just learn and like figure out how to like make this work when he's been beset upon by his god with this thing. And then he makes great friends. Ultimately, tells the truth. The headmaster is like a goat man who's immortal. So you still have like the interesting adventure things happening, but it's never like he feels like he's always with his people. Like, he doesn't give in to depression and despair. The author is not writing that story. It feels comforting. It feels comforting, like when you're facing like this astronomical like thing that is against you, that you can still persevere. So I super recommend it. And like I said, I don't know if I can loan you the first like 3 or 4 that I bought, but if I can, I will.
Okay.
Otherwise, like you've already seen, if I can find like the Beware of Chicken after Alex is done, you're welcome to read that.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to buy copies of all of these. I couldn't get them through Libby. I'm very sad about it. Like, I might have to go to I might go to the library directly and see if I can request them to be purchased. I just couldn't do it through Libby. Anyway, that's what I've been reading. Just chewing through those books. But Annie, tell me, please, what are you reading?
Kaylee, you'll be so proud of me. I've been reading poetry.
Yay! I love it. I love it.
I've been reading Ruby Kaur, who is a famous poet who she got her start on social media. You might have seen it'll be like a quote on top of like a hand-drawn like line art background. She was doing her own illustrations and posting them on Instagram along with her very short poetry. And she went viral that way, and so she was able to parlay that into book deals. A lot of people are like, oh, it's so derivative, blah, but whatever. I like it. I think it's good. This Milk and Honey was part of the project I was doing. I was looking at it because it was a book that was banned. I don't think that this was ever in anyone's kid's classroom. The first chapter is all about the poetry. Her poetry is all about being assaulted as a child numerous times by a close family member. Like, I cannot imagine anyone was like, yes, the children should and always shall read. Like, no. And there's graphic illustrations as well. Like, it's a whole thing. It was incredible because, like I said, that's the first chapter. And then the second chapter is all about healing. And then the third chapter is all about finding ways to love yourself and then love someone else. And then if that person hurts you too, digging into loving yourself. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's relatively short. I don't think it took me very long overall to read it. The illustrations are just very simple line art illustrations, but you can tell, like, obviously that she drew an illustration to go with the poem. Some of the poems are very long, like the run-on sentence style thing that takes up a whole page and is super, like, emotional. Some of them are just 2 lines. I actually did read one out loud to my husband. It was a beautiful love poem, and it was gorgeous. Yes. Do you want me to read it to you?
Yes.
Okay. Also, I'm reading the collected comic books of Mass Effect.
I love it.
We got to go high and low around here. You know what I'm
saying? That's fair. That's fair.
All right. You might not have been my first love, but you were the love that made all the other loves irrelevant. Really cute.
That's beautiful.
It's really wonderful. It's called Milk and Honey by Rebecca Cowrick, and I do not recommend it at all for anyone who is struggling with any kind of emotional weight right now. It does, like, dig deep inside of you and hurt you. But if you are willing to go on the journey with her, the ending is all about healing and loving yourself and acknowledging that if you can't love yourself, then you cannot expect anyone else to do that work for you. And don't ever let anyone try to do work for you when you need to do it yourself. It was beautiful.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Did you have a Kaylee Coda for us today?
I do. Don't ignore the real problem in favor of something a distraction. Like, we know when this is happening. We know when we're doing this personally in our lives. It is our inclination to downplay larger issues or to ignore them in favor of something that we feel is more consumable. We should acknowledge that and then refocus our attention and our energy on the actual problems. So don't ignore a boulder to kick a rock.
Thank you for listening to The Ink Stink. This is still Annie and Kaylee coming at you live.
Hey!
Not live. We're recorded probably several weeks before you listen to this.
Coming at you on the air.
On the interwebs.
We did it, guys.
Interwebs is an old millennial phrase.
We made it through the tubes.
We did all of your tubes. We're coming for your tubes. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Substack if you would like to read our transcripts. We are trying to be as accessible as possible. The Substack transcripts are the one that we have control of. We have no control over this one that Spotify posts on our behalf. Sorry. You can also find us on YouTube and all of the major podcast apps. You can support us. All of your support is so incredibly appreciated. Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much, Kevin. We appreciate you all so much.
You're the best.
You can support us through Substack, Spotify, and on our Linktree. And you can find our Linktree with even more links for more books and more book topics wherever you found this podcast. Thanks for listening.